Stop me if you've heard this one before. You complain about third world labor being exploited overseas, and yet you still buy your iPhones and your Starbucks lattes and your premium Netflix subscriptions. You complain about elected officials being incompetent and corrupt, but you still elect the same politicians year after year. You want to improve society, and yet you still live in society. You know what that makes you? A hypocrite. So what the argument is actually saying, in the most basic sense, is that society provides the material needs not just for you, but for the plurality of people in the world. And that, it's not just a bad idea to complain about it because it might endanger your well-being, but it's also a bad idea to complain about it and to suggest changes because that might endanger the well-being of a significant number of other people. Most people, perhaps. It's kind of like saying, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. If society is providing all of your needs, and that's what the assumption is, then you don't question how society provides those needs for you. It makes you seem ungrateful. It makes you seem like you're arguing in bad faith. There are variants to this argument, as there are variants to most of the arguments that I'm going to present. The most common, I think, is the argument that you're complaining about society because you are not complicit in your place in society, that you are not satisfied with your place and want to move up at the expense of other people, explicitly at the expense of other people, regardless of what it is exactly that you're complaining about. Another common refrain is that the solutions to the problems that you're presenting are unrealistic or overly demanding. This can overlap a little bit with the idea that the arguments you're making are disingenuous by themselves. This is especially common if the fascist or fascist-adjacent person uses the third world as a bulwark in their argument. A less common, but still common, variant of this argument that is gaining popularity recently is that you ought to obey the rules whether you like them or not. Usually because either these rules that we have now, the way our society is run, is the best way it could possibly be operated in, or alternatively, because you personally may be ill-equipped to actually make the changes you are proposing. Jordan Peterson, I'm to understand, is very, very fond of that last variant. What needs to be understood primarily is that this argument is not meant for you, the person whom the fascist or fascist-adjacent person is debating. It's meant for the audience. You, the person who is complaining, is being compared negatively to some people in the audience, to people whom are being spoken to. Real men don't complain about their lot in life, they work to improve it! I've talked about this before, very briefly. I think I called it negative empowerment, but this sort of thing comes with a lot of baggage. You, the person who is having the argument, are being compared negatively. You are being explicitly described as a lesser for wanting society to be better for more people. I feel like I shouldn't have to tell people that the right wing is very good at separating people and othering them from one another. And yet here we are. The right can and has and will frequently separate people by nationality, by date of birth, by political affiliation, by race, by gender, by diet. The tricky thing is that this allows the fascist or fascist-adjacent person to control both sides of the argument through the threat of ostracization. Do you want to be a soy boy? Do you want to be a disgusting feminist soy boy? If you don't, then eat more meat! It's not even a debate tactic. It's straightforward proselytization. You're presenting a worldview that if you do not comply with that worldview, you will be shunned. Do you want to go to hell? Do you want to go to hell and be torn apart by demons for all eternity? Then convert to Christianity right now! This argument also tells us something very important about the person making the argument, about what they believe. It doesn't just tell us that they believe that society is just fine the way it is. It also tells us that they believe any change to that society, any change to the way that things function, whether it be empowering to some people or disempowering to others, is a threat to their well-being. That specific worldview has consequences and ramifications that we'll talk about further, but we should note here that that message is most appealing to people who are already in, at least ostensibly, positions of power. Privileged people, I would say. Let's say young, cisgendered, white men. So, if you want to rebut this, the first thing that you need to understand, the first thing that you should suggest to the other person, that is that you are allowed to criticize the society that you live in. Criticizing society, being critical of society, of norms, of the way that things are done, are the way that things have improved. If no one questioned slavery, then we would still have slavery. If no one questioned Jim Crow, we would still have Jim Crow. If no one questioned don't ask, don't tell, then we would still have don't ask, don't tell. And more often than not, these conservatives are not going to disagree with those positions. Not because they don't disagree with them, but because, well, we'll get into that. Also, our current society literally doesn't provide the needs of most people, and it does that deliberately. Capitalism is built on exploitation. You can't build capital without some kind of exploitation, and exploitation can be understood as literally not meeting the material needs of someone or something. And we are in a stage right now where the material needs of most people are not being met because it is more profitable to not meet people's needs. No rational person, whether or not they are a fascist or a fascist-adjacent person, would deny that. If they do deny that, then they are literally wrong, and you can hammer on them for that. And if they don't deny it, then that gives you an opportunity to ask them why they believe that that kind of exploitation is acceptable. Ultimately, this argument that you cannot criticize society is an attack on your character, not an attack on the argument itself. Ultimately, this argument that you are not allowed to criticize society, that you are not allowed to criticize something that provides for your needs, is an attack on your character, not on the argument. They're saying that you are not capable of either understanding your own needs or understanding how society functions. And it's not rational. It's not good. So yeah. No editing around this week, I hope, and until we get there, take care of yourselves, alright?